Welcome to Think Dr. Osborne's Brain. If you've got nutrition questions, hopefully I've got an answer for you today. You can go ahead and start typing those questions into the feed if you haven't already, and I'll do my best to get those answered in the next hour or so. If you missed Tuesday's show on causation of autoimmune disease, highly recommend you go back and watch it. It was an extra long show packed with a lot of detailed information, but in summary, autoimmune disease is caused by 4 primary triggers: food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies. So if you've been diagnosed with autoimmune disease and you haven't worked with your doctor to navigate through those 4 categorical triggers, you need to. If you want hope, if you want resolution without medication and lifelong immune suppression, that's where you need to start. So if you missed that show, take that summary home with you. Now let's dive into your questions. Let's see. Jessica says, Dr. Osborne, last week you talked about using vanilla with water in a spray bottle for no-see-ums and using lemon balm with citronella for mosquitoes. So there's actually, for vanilla, I just use straight vanilla. I don't mix any water at all. I just, you just take vanilla, put it in a spray bottle, and then mist your skin. And that works really, really well to prevent both gnats as well as no-see-ums. As far as lemon balm and citronella, there's a product that has both those oils in it, in an oil immersion base, and I don't remember the name brand, but it's in a dark green bottle. I'd have to go back and look that up, but I'm sure if you did an internet search, you could find it, Jessica. Let's see. Melinda says, how do you prevent kidney stones on higher doses of vitamin C? Lots of water. Generally speaking, vitamin C is not a cause of kidney stones. Minute amounts of vitamin C can be broken down into oxalate, which is, some kidney stones are made from oxalate. But vitamin C in and of itself is not a primary driver of kidney stones. As a matter of fact, if you're struggling with kidney stones, I would, more than looking at vitamin C, I would highly encourage you to look at yeast overgrowth. One of the byproducts of yeast metabolism. So if you've got like a candida overgrowth in your body, whether it be your gut or your sinuses or anywhere else, these microorganisms can produce oxalates in higher quantities. And this is one of the reasons why we see people developing oxalate issues, such as kidney stones. So look into yeast as a potential driver. Also look at zinc, vitamin B6, and copper, because these nutrients are necessary to help you break oxalate down. And if, in essence, your body has a natural process whereby it breaks those oxalates down. You can certainly stay really super hydrated. One of the most effective ways to reduce the potential risk of kidney stones is just drinking enough water and avoiding things that would dehydrate you. So hopefully that helps you. Let's see. Question about HLA DQ2 and DQ8. I tested both of these after I watched your videos and both came back negative. What does this mean? It means you don't have a DQ2 or a DQ8. But did you test DQ1 and DQ3? Because those 2 markers are what we call non-celiac gluten-sensitive markers. The other question mark there would be, did you test HLA DQ2 and DQ8 on both the alpha-1 and the beta-1 gene? Because there's 2 gene markers there that we're referring to, HLA DQ alpha-1, HLA DQ beta-1. Most labs stop at only testing the beta-1 gene. So if you're negative for 2 and 8 on your beta-1 gene, it doesn't mean you're negative for 2 and 8 on your alpha-1 gene. Also, there's DQ1 and DQ3, which are the non-celiac gluten-sensitive genes that very rarely get tested. If you tested through Gluten-Free Society, those were measured. If you didn't, I would speculate that they probably were not, in which case, if you came back 2 and 8 negative, it doesn't mean much. It means that there's not a great likelihood of developing celiac disease for the most part, but it doesn't mean that you're not gluten sensitive. Do you have any information on vitiligo? Yeah, we do. We did a big show, Justine, a while back on the skin, including segments on vitiligo. And so you might want to go back and check that out. We'll put a link in the feed for you here, and you can bookmark that for watching later. And we also have at Gluten-Free Society, we have articles on how gluten impacts the development of vitiligo and how certain vitamins are important for recovery of pigmentation or halting of the progression of vitiligo. I've seen two things clinically in people with kind of a backdrop of vitiligo. One, I've seen where diet change and nutritional supplementation has stopped the progression of vitiligo. In essence, these people had, fast progressing skin depigmentation, and with good diet change and supplementation, in many cases, you can stop that progression from going further. I've also seen cases where we do see repigmentation. Now, I don't want to say that everybody with vitiligo is going to repigment all aspects of their skin by changing their diet. That's not been my experience, but I have seen it. And so I think in my experience, it's the earlier you catch it, the earlier you change your diet and get ahead of it, the better the odds of getting some repigmentation. So, but check out our gluten-free site. If you go to glutenfreesociety.org, type in keyword vitiligo, and you should pull up some good information. I noticed a sensation of blood coursing through the inside of my foot at rest in bed and exercise when walking. I'm not obese and chronic vascular inflammation. I had all year was subsided to normal. I don't know where the question is in that. You're describing your experience, but maybe put in a question. Oh, is there anything you should do? I don't know what you mean when you say that your chronic vascular inflammation, that you don't have it. I mean, was there any objective testing done? Because that's where I would start. If you have, if you're having abnormal symptoms, I would start with, the adequate testing to rule out the potential for vascular inflammation. And there are several different types of tests that can help you understand that. High sensitivity C-reactive protein, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, MMP9 are all tests that, that you could ask your doctor to run. But even beyond that, there's so many other factors that can contribute to inflammation and the type of symptom that you're describing. Many of which are nutrition, vitamins, mineral deficiencies, that kind of thing. So I might encourage you to start with a good INA test to measure your nutrition status as well. You can get INA testing through our website, glutenfreesociety.org. I'd strongly encourage any of you watching, if you really want to know more about what supplements are right for you, what you should be taking versus not, test, don't guess. Use our INA test, and I'll put a link below for those of you who want to go read more about it and possibly do it. Let's see here. Debbie says, my grandson's 15 years old and works out like crazy and can pick up 400 pounds. Listening some guy tell him to eat till he feels like he's going to throw up. I'm trying to tell him that's not right. Am I wrong? Yeah, it's not right. I mean, don't eat until you feel like you're going to throw up. As a matter of fact, I mean, if your grandson's trying to work out and gain muscle, just eat enough protein. It's not about eating till you throw up. Whoever that guy is, I mean, he's probably, I don't know. I don't want to make comment about something I don't have direct relationship or experience with, but like I was a bodybuilder for years, and you don't eat till you throw up. You make sure you're getting enough protein, and you make sure you're getting the right things to recover from exercise. Exercise is especially heavy weightlifting, can be a tax and strenuous on the body, and you want to make sure you got enough protein to recover from those workouts, but you also want to make sure you got specific nutrients like glutamine and branched chain amino acids. Creatine can be extremely helpful to pack on muscle and to get stronger. But you don't have to eat till you throw up, and you certainly don't want to become obese. Now, if he's working out to become a power lifter, there's some different nuances to that, but without that context, it's hard for me to say. Do you know what might be triggering granuloma annulare? Yeah, a lot of times mold or yeast overgrowth. Foods can certainly be triggers. Zinc deficiency is a possibility gene. So I would look at all those, in your endeavors. If a person is gluten-free and does blood work, how can you tell if they're celiac? You can't, because you don't diagnose celiac from blood work. The way celiac is diagnosed is, well, in part blood work, but that's not the definitive part of it. So there's a test that measures the antibodies to something called tissue transglutaminase. This test is done first. If it comes back positive, then usually the doctor will want to do something called a biopsy of the intestine, and they'll do an upper GI and upper endoscopy, and then they'll take some biopsy specimens looking for villus atrophy, which is a flattening of the intestinal lining on the image, on the slides, on the pathology slides. So if you've got a positive antibody test, then you go on to do the confirmation for celiac, which is positive villus atrophy through upper GI. That's how celiac technically is diagnosed. Now, I don't agree with that. I think it's flawed in many ways. However, I'm trying to answer your question in the context that you asked it. So if you're trying to understand whether or not you should go gluten-free, the easiest way is to just go gluten-free. Read my book, No Grain, No Pain. Go gluten-free, follow that 30-day diet plan. And then if you feel really well and you find yourself getting better, and then go back again and try to reintroduce those foods if you feel worse, that's a pretty good indicator that that you should continue to avoid it. Now, if you want testing specifically, I recommend genetic testing. We were talking about this a moment ago for HLA-DQ2, HLA-DQ8, HLA-DQ1, and HLA-DQ3 genotypes. And that, if you want to do that, you can ask your doctor for it. Or if your doctor, again, a lot of doctors stop at 2 and 8, DQ2 and 8. You can do that testing through Gluten-Free Society. We do offer that in our testing tab. So you can go check that out as well. How long does it take for autoimmune symptoms to go away? Depends on what's causing them, and depends on how compliant the person is with, getting rid of the triggers. And it also depends on whether or not you've isolated and identified all the triggers. But if, let's say you have, let's just theoretically say, yep, you're avoiding the right foods, you're adding the right nutrients in, you should notice improvement in the first 6 months. Now, not going away. When you say go away, you're not going to get remission typically in 6 months. It's just not. With autoimmunity, it generally takes 18 months or so, approximately. Again, give or take nuances and variables. But 18 months, because that's the time frame by which it takes your immune system to regenerate 3 times. You need about 3 turnovers of immune cells to really get autoimmune disease into quiescence through diet and lifestyle change. That being said, you should be noticing a dramatic symptomatic improvement within the first 6 months if you're doing it right. And many people notice changes quite immediately within a matter of days and sometimes a matter of weeks. That part is not, it depends on the person, and it depends on other variables, but give it at least 6 months. It takes at least 2 months for gluten to get out of your system. We've got a really comprehensive video on that, an article on how long it takes gluten to get out of your system that you can check out. But if your autoimmune disease is being triggered by gluten, you're not even going to get the gluten out of your system for at least 2 months. So a lot of people that are just going on the diet and saying, oh, I did it for 2 weeks and I didn't notice any difference. Yeah, the gluten's not out of your system yet. You're not going to really, I don't expect you always to notice a tremendous difference. So keep those things in mind. I wish I could give you a definitive, everybody heals at X time, but unfortunately, that's just not the way that it works. Is there anything I should do? Let's see. Oh, that's it. No, never mind. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but I really don't believe the diagnosis. I do believe I got gut damage because of Accutane use. I would agree with that. I've seen that be the case. Accutane-induced inflammatory bowel. What are some of the best ways to heal my gut again? Get with a good doctor, a functional doctor, and get the right testing done. Because if you're talking about gut damage, first identify it. First identify even if it was Accutane induced. Let's just say it was. You still have to have the right nutrients to heal and repair the damage caused by the Accutane. So sometimes removing the cause does not allow for recovery because your body needs the right things to heal from the damage that was caused. And from that perspective, getting a good gut analysis by a functional doctor is a good place to start, along with measuring your vitamin and mineral deficiency to see whether or not you're lacking certain key nutrients that might help you recover. With Accutane, one of the big things that can happen is that high doses of synthetic vitamin A can compete with vitamin D and vitamin K and vitamin E, which can have impact on inflammatory bowel disease. So it could be that that's one of the mechanisms involved in what you've experienced, but I would start with getting testing done. Now, what you can also do without any testing at all is follow the diet of no grain, no pain. Make sure that you are getting lots of sunshine to skin tolerance. Make sure that you incorporate some fasting into your regimen if you can tolerate it. Minimum some intermittent fasting, like a 16-8 schedule. But if you can do longer fast, 1 day up to 3-day fasts can sometimes be very, very helpful to jumpstart the healing process in your gut. So those are just all strategies you could attempt. What nutrients help insulin sensitivity for non-diabetics who want to keep healthy blood sugar? Very simply, vitamin B3, zinc, magnesium, chromium, inositol are some of the key nutrients that play a role in insulin sensitization on the surface of your cells. So I would start there. Melinda, I'd also encourage you to watch my crash course on controlling blood sugar, where I go into the depth of the biochemistry behind all the different nutrients, not just with insulin, but also the insulin receptor and the internal processes biochemically of how our body breaks glucose down and converts it into energy, because all of those pieces are going to be an important part to your question. What helps when an acute illness raises your blood sugars? In what regard? Because your blood sugars under an acute stress situation, you don't want to suppress blood sugar elevation. It's your body's response to help it heal and repair and recover. So if it's just an acute situation driving that, it's not something I would want to do anything about. It's kind of like blocking inflammation initially. If you have acute inflammation, one of the worst things you can do really is ice. Ice stops the body's healing process. It interferes with getting and driving the right kinds of cells into that tissue to create a situation where you're basically breaking down the damaged tissue and removing it so that your body can heal and repair again. You don't want to interfere with acute body responses. Now, chronic is another matter, but acute, let your body do its work. Chronic bile sludge and how to effectively treat it. What is bile sludge? How does it become sludge? It's just basically it's thick bile in a nutshell. When your body doesn't have the capacity to put bile together effectively. For a lot of people, sludgy bile. I noticed that you mentioned you're taking taurine on a daily basis. So taurine can contribute to sludgy bile, but so too can vitamin C. I don't know if you've done vitamin C at all, but the other thing that really can affect bile production is liver damage. The liver itself is responsible for production of bile. And if you've got things that are damaging your liver, whether it's environmental toxins, the wrong food, gluten is notorious for contributing to this as an example. You can also have environmental toxin exposures that can put stress or pressure on the liver and that can contribute to its inability to properly produce bile. So I would look at those as potential triggers if you're already taking high-dose taurine, and I would start there first. My oat showed high pyruvate. So those of you doing oat testing as a means to try to understand your vitamin and mineral deficiencies, you're wasting your money. There are benefits to doing oat testing sometimes, but not for measurement of vitamins and minerals or other nutrients. It's very inaccurate, and it's a very poor indicator to help people really figure out what's going on, because that test can be affected by so many things. It can be affected by your diet. It's what we would call an acute test. It's a lot like a serum test where, what you just ate affects the results or the outcome to grade. And so it doesn't give you any real context over your long-term nutritional status. If you really want to understand your nutritional status, put the oat test down, put the serum lab test down, and go get an INA test done, period. End of story. I mean, I have done it every way. For 25 years in practice, I have tested every way that you can test a human nutritionally. And hands down, intracellular analysis is by far the most accurate and the most helpful clinically. So if you're trying to figure out what to supplement, what you need. Quit relying on those tests, those acute-based tests. They're not going to get you your answers. With a history of high blood pressure, can one have any form of salt at all? Of course, and you should be eating salt. Salt doesn't cause high blood pressure. Let me just start there. That's BS. I don't know where you found that, where you read that or heard that. A lot of doctors promote that, and that may be where. Salt doesn't cause high blood pressure. Salt regulates and can, in many cases, normalize blood pressure issues. I would argue that we have had the lowest sodium attack in the history of mankind in the last 40 years when they started attacking salt and everything became low sodium. I think where people get in trouble isn't the salt. I think it's the MSG, the monosodium glutamate, which makes foods taste salty. But that particular product can elevate your blood pressure. It's a stimulant. It stimulates neuronal receptors that can drive up blood pressure. But good old-fashioned salt, and I'm talking about sea salt, Himalayan salt, you should endeavor to have regular amounts of it and not fear it for fear of raising your blood pressure. If a family member's T4 is a little high and free T3 is normal, does the high T4 cause any problems? Not necessarily, but the question doesn't give me enough context really to answer it. Is the person having symptoms of too much thyroid? Heart palpitations, hot flashes, trouble sleeping, anxiety, hair loss are all common symptoms of too much thyroid hormone. Is the person taking thyroid medication? Because that's another part of it. If they're taking thyroid medication, they may be being overdosed. And overdosing on thyroid, even regular dose of thyroid medication causes bone loss over time. So we've got to be real careful when it comes to being on the medication. Outside of that, I mean, there are things that can drive up thyroid hormones. So like Graves' disease would be an example. So I don't without that kind of context, it's hard to know if that high T4 is a problem or not. But as a general rule of thumb, I would look at the thyroid in a comprehensive manner to make a better determination. How do we remove mycotoxins from the brain once out of mold and on binders? Your body's going to help do that, Lynn, naturally through sweating, through regular bowel movements, through urination. The binders do not remove mycotoxins from your brain. That is a misconception. Binders bind mainly in the intestine. What happens is your body gets rid of mycotoxins three primary ways: one through sweat, one through urine, one through the stool. When you're getting rid of mycotoxins through the stool, because bile has a high affinity for mold toxins, it will attach to them, it will bind to them. And about 95% of your bile gets reabsorbed back to your liver. So what happens is you get a recycling of toxins between your liver and your gut. That's where binders come into play. They mainly work here in the GI tract, not so much in the blood. What you want to do for the blood is you want to get the toxins biotransformed. And this happens as your blood is pulling toxins out of your tissue. And predominantly this occurs in the liver. Your liver will biotransform those fat-soluble toxins because mycotoxins are fat-soluble. And so you'll take them through a couple of different reactions in the liver to turn them into water-soluble toxins, right? So step one is you take them and you convert them from a fat to a water-soluble toxin. Step two, you attach an agent onto that water-soluble to make it less toxic so that it can be excreted from the body. And there are things that definitely can help your liver with that. Alpha-lipoic acid, in my opinion, one of my favorite aids to use when we're thinking about doing mycotoxin detoxification. Glutathione, I love for this. N-acetylcysteine, I also love for this. And then also methylated B vitamins, because they play a major role in the methylation process, which is part of what helps you to detoxify as well. So, but binders aren't going to do anything for the mycotoxins that are stored in your cells and are still in your bloodstream, right? It has to make it to your gut first for the binders to do their work. And this is especially true of like cholestyramine. You don't absorb it really into the bloodstream. It works by binding bile acid in your gut. And for those of you that are using like the cholesterol class of cholesterol lowering medications, what are known as bile acid sequestrants, kind of the most common one that's used is Welchol, but cholestyramine is its name. And that particular medicine, as it binds bile acids, it reduces your ability to absorb fat, which is an unfortunate side effect. So when you reduce that ability, you're going to increase your risk for the development of fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies, vitamin A, D, E, and K. You're also going to reduce your absorption of omega-3 fats, which play a critical role in recovery from mold. I mean, one of the primary treatments in mold recovery is to try to get the inflammation back under control. And we do that with high doses of omega-3, or we do that with something called SPM, specialized pro-resolving mediators. Very, very important part of the protocol to stop the inflammation that has happened over years of exposure from those mycotoxins. So binders don't do any of those things. And if you're taking bile acid sequestrant binders, they will in some ways actually work against your healing. That's why I'm not a big fan of them. I like, if we're going to do binders, I really like humic acid, fulvic acid, zeolite, charcoal, and even fiber binders if you can tolerate it. Some people with mold history don't tolerate fiber at all. This is why they go on a carnivore diet, because eating any kind of fiber just really wrecks them. But if you tolerate fibers can be a great way to bind mycotoxins in the GI tract as well and help you to push them out. So little crash course in detox there, but I hope that's helpful for you. Have you studied spirulina and chlorella relative to autoimmune disease? Yeah, and spirulina and chlorella don't have a causation effect with autoimmune disease. Now, you can use those things for medicinal purposes, Terry, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But my priority in autoimmune disease, hands down, is not to give people another supplement to address their symptoms or improve their detox. My priority is to remove their triggers. That is number one, because if you don't remove triggers, people won't get better, no matter what you throw at them, no matter how much spirulina, no matter how much chlorella, or any other thing for that matter, right? So remove triggers first. And secondarily, it's to support the body with the nutrients that it needs to heal and repair. And although spirulina and chlorella can have nutrients in them, there's a risk of those products being contaminated, which I don't like. I prefer raw ingredient nutrients, vitamins, minerals, based on a person's testing. So I will measure their nutritional status so that I can specifically target what nutrients to support them with as they're trying to heal and repair. Can you please explain what rheumatoid factor means? Yeah, rheumatoid factor is just it's a marker in the blood that measures for an antibody that would indicate rheumatoid arthritis. So it's an indicator that this particular kind of antibody is what does the damage to cartilage and creates the classic pannus formation in the joint. It's what leads to the degradation. And rheumatoid factor as a test is just an antibody test that helps doctors to measure and quantify whether that's happening in you. It's one of the 7 criteria to diagnose rheumatoid arthritis. You don't need to have a positive rheumatoid factor. You can have a negative rheumatoid factor and still be diagnosed with RA. But that's what we would call seronegative RA if you were rheumatoid factor negative. Do IV antibiotics cause damage to your microbiome? Yeah, just because they're IV doesn't mean that they don't affect your microbiome. So all the above, right? Any form of antibiotic is going to, once it's absorbed, it's got systemic access to your body, and that's where it's going to affect every tissue, not just the blood. Now, if you're in a state of sepsis and you need an IV antibiotic, by all means, don't be scared. Get it, and get your life saved. But I've seen this a lot, where a lot of doctors love to use IV antibiotics as a preventative for surgery. And I don't know if that's your situation or not, but it's a conversation worth having, risk benefit with your doctor. Can chronic Lyme disease mess with the lymphatic system? Lyme Lyme infection can create a tremendous amount of oxidative damage. And part of how we clean and clear out cellular debris in the blood is through the lymphatic system. So yes, chronic Lyme damage can put pressure on the lymphatic system, which is why it's so important. And the irony there is that Lyme generally causes a lot of pain, both joint and neurological, and then a lot of fatigue. And so these people don't feel like moving, they don't feel like exercising. But if they're not, they can actually deteriorate faster. And that part of that has to do with lymphatic clearing of biotoxins. So your lymphatic system plays a very, very important role in that. And this is one of the primary benefits of maintaining physical activity as much as you can. What depletes potassium? Why would some people need more? I mean, anything that's a diuretic generally will deplete potassium. So those of you on blood pressure medications, potassium, a lot of them are going to drain your potassium. Stress depletes potassium. Corticosteroids deplete potassium. Excessive sweating depletes potassium. So it's going to naturally come out of you through your sweat and through your urine. And so eating adequate quantities becomes an important, element in replenishment. So, but if we're talking about just general human behaviors, too much stress and taking the wrong medications chronically will have a tremendous impact on potassium long-term. Is there a difference between CRP and CRP-HS? Are they one and the same? No, they're not. CRP, regular CRP, which is just C-reactive protein. And then there's HS CRP, which is high sensitivity CRP. It's more accurate. High sensitivity, just think of that as it's the more accurate version of the test. You can get it, a lot of times you'll get a normal CRP and then you go to a HS CRP and you'll get a positive. So I don't ever order CRP in people anymore. I only order HS CRP when I'm seeing somebody. Are methylmalonic acid tests and vitamin B12 tests reliable for B12 level? Yes and no. So methylmalonic acid is just one chemical byproduct of low B12, and it definitely can mean that your B12 is low. But you can have normal methylmalonic acid and have low B12. You can also have, the same thing is true of your serum. You can have normal looking serum B12 levels and still be low in vitamin B12. And this has to do with liver redistribution. Your liver stores, 12 to 18 months of B12 in it. And so what'll happen when your cells are becoming depleted in B12, your liver will receive that message and it will distribute B12 into the bloodstream. If that happens to be when you're getting your blood drawn, your levels could look normal even though your body is struggling to maintain adequate stores. So I don't rely on either one of those tests, Bonnie, to understand B12 as much as I like INA. But those tests, if your doctor's willing to run them, they can be helpful, again, but not in its comprehensive context. Do you know what can be done for sarcoidosis in the brain, optic cranial nerve inflammation? My wife has third nerve palsy in the right eye. Mark, get her on the no grain, no pain diet as quickly as possible. Get her a copy of the book, get the diet dialed in. Sarcoidosis can be diet responsive. I've seen cases of it where diet change really had a huge impact. As a matter of fact, one case that I just saw last year, it only took about 12 months, and she really, she still checks in with her kidney doctor. I still send her back to her kidney doc, but because sarcoidosis, a lot of times it also affects the kidneys. But she's stable. She's very, very stable, and she doesn't need the medications. And all she did was change her diet and correct her nutrition. So definitely start with diet change. Now, I've also seen people with sarcoidosis that are non-responsive to diet change. Many of them I've seen have mold in their environment or mold in the background. So you definitely also think about that in terms of your wife. Have you ever had water damage in your home? Is your humidity in your home being properly controlled? Is there a musty smell? Any kind of evidence of mold at all? Those are all things that I would also consider in any case of sarcoidosis. I've seen that connection too many times. Is getting an MRI safe? As a general rule, yeah. I mean, if you're trying to get a good physical diagnosis of a structural problem, MRI can be very helpful in that regard. What I don't like with MRIs is when they inject the dyes. The dyes are very hard on the kidney. They're heavy metal, and the body doesn't always get rid of them very easily. So, but if you're just doing a straight MRI without dye, that can be very helpful, and it's relatively safe to do that. I have Hashimoto's and adrenal fatigue. I have surgery in 2 weeks to remove a very infected root canal. Should I hold off on surgery a short time to prepare my body for or get the infection out? If you've got an infection, get it out. If Laura, go check out our surgery protocol. If you don't have access to it, just reach out. We've got it. It's online at Gluten-Free Society. But look at our pre-post surgery protocol. If you're trying to support yourself nutritionally to minimize complications, do that. But don't wait to get it out. If you've got a confirmed infection in your mouth, it could be contributing tremendously to your Hashimoto's. I mean, there are numerous types of bacteria that we know can trigger molecular mimicry against the thyroid, leading to Hashimoto's or contributing to Hashimoto's. So don't wait if you want to resolve, that situation. I take Ativan as needed for anxiety. However, I started taking your mycobinders instead and getting a good result without hangover effects. Why is this? Because Ativan is Ativan is working on your neurochemistry in a suppressive manner, whereas mycobinders are getting rid of and grabbing onto neurotoxins and helping pull them out. So as you detox, you're gonna feel better. You're gonna have an outcome that's positive, especially if you're not retoxing. My son has type 1 diabetes, and his consultant has said he needs to take metformin. Boy, that's really odd. Why? I mean, if he's type 1 diabetic, he's already on insulin. So that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, Leslie, unless there's a typo in what you just wrote. Is there an alternative? Talk to the doctor about berberine. The human studies, berberine versus metformin, are pretty equal, meaning that they compare really, really well in terms of outcomes. Berberine sensitizes to insulin, but it doesn't. The problem with metformin is it causes B12 and folate and CoQ10 deficiency, and it actually long term it does DNA damage. It can cause DNA mutation damage, which you don't want for your son. No one does. I would. Have you changed his diet? I've seen a lot of type 1 diabetes over the years where when we change their diet, their need for insulin goes way down. So they need less of it less often, which is good. The other thing we see is that they control their blood sugar so much better. And so, if your son is being told and he also needs metformin along with insulin, it's probably because he's not being well controlled. There's something else going on. And so the diet itself is going to play a tremendous role there. And if he hasn't changed his diet, or if you haven't looked at that, it's a priority in my opinion. So go get a copy if you don't have one of No Grain, No Pain, and start him on that diet. There's a 30-day program in there with diet rotation and everything and then have him monitor his insulin need as you do that. Because if he's type 1 diabetic, what happens a lot of times when they change their diet is their insulin doses become too strong. So then they end up chasing lows and highs, and you don't want to do that either. So just pay very close attention. And if he's got one of those monitors, those blood glucose, real-time monitors, or even an insulin pump that works on demand, what you'll notice is that demand goes way down. Me and my daughter have Hashi's. I'm in remission. She is almost there. That's good to know. Thanks for the commentary. What repellent discourages ant bites? I haven't found that. Actually, what repels ants is molasses, if you're looking for something natural. And what we do in our garden, because I'm down in Texas, in South Texas, you're going to have fire ants, is we keep a sprayer and it has molasses about, in the concentration, it's like 20% molasses, 80% water approximately. And once a week, I go through the garden and I'll spray preventatively the molasses. And if I see any ant piles at all, I'll hammer the ant pile with molasses, and it deters them. So that way, that when I'm in my garden working, weeding, and doing other things, I don't have as much of a risk of getting eaten up by them. Because, you know, with fire ants, generally by the time you're in them, you've been bit 100 times already. So, but nothing to my knowledge is going to deter them. Like, there's nothing I know that you can spray on your skin directly that's going to stop them from biting you once you've gotten into them and you've basically pissed them off. So, but if you want to keep their growth from where you hang out, molasses. We used to actually take we had a big sprayer, you know, it was like 100-gallon sprayer, and we'd fill it with molasses and fish meal and other things. We'd use that to it was an organic fertilization of our property. And that's where I noticed the ant beds diminished dramatically when we sprayed the entire property, but it was the molasses as the ingredient that had that effect. After we noticed the ants diminish, I went back and researched it a little bit more, and I found some really great farmers talking about the use of molasses. So anyway, that's the best thing I've seen for ants. My hematologist at my insistence, maybe it's a typo, did a blood test for mold, high aspergillus. He dissed the results. I don't know what kind of blood test he did. Was it an antibody test? Because with mold, if you're allergic to aspergillus, like an IgE antibody test, that doesn't mean you're being exposed to aspergillus in your home. It just means you have an acute allergy to aspergillus. If it was an IgG antibody test, it means that your body, depending on what kind of IgG, there's IgG4, which can be protective, and then there's regular IgG, which can indicate that you're having reactions and your body's trying to protect you from those reactions. But if you're talking about a blood test, it's probably an antibody test. And that's not a good, I mean, it's not that it's a bad test, it's just not a definitive test for mold exposure. I've been addressing my Crohn's without doctors or pharma for the last 20 years. I seem to need copious amounts of glutamine to maintain in remission. When working out, I get flare-ups. Working out can cause, depending on how intense your workout is, Jake, can cause intestinal permeability. Intense workout can, and it's one of the trigger factors for autoimmunity. You might look at butyrate as an option too, and you can actually have your butyrate levels tested. You can supplement butyrate. You can also get butyrate from foods. But I would look at those things. I would also look at, because glutamine at high doses is not fixing your problem. It may be keeping it in remission, because glutamine is a primary fuel source for intestinal cells. It also has anti-inflammatory and gut healing properties. But you may be just missing something. Maybe get tested for other food sensitivities, get your nutritional values or levels measured, get a microbiome test done of your GI tract to help you understand whether or not you have any bacteria that are kind of lingering that could contribute to it. One of the families of bacteria we commonly see with Crohn's is C. diff. And so I would start there by looking at those particulars and seeing if you're missing something. I have celiac disease with Gujarat-Sjogren. I don't know what you mean by that, but with Sjogren, thyroid ablation with rosacea for a year. In your opinion, are all these illnesses caused by celiac? Yes. Very, very much so. Sjogren's, thyroid, rosacea all have direct correlation with celiac, but also non-celiac. And because you already have that history of celiac and know it, gluten definitely can play a role in all of them. I mean, we know that just from epidemiological studies on celiacs, we know they have a higher incidence of Sjogren's. We know they have a higher incidence of Hashimoto's. We also know from research, and I know this just from clinical experience, is that when you take people with celiac disease grain-free, not gluten-free in the traditional sense, because the celiac diet is wheat, barley, and rye-free, but a true gluten-free diet, a true grain-free diet is also free of oats, free of corn and rice, which are common substitute foods for celiacs. I don't recommend them. We see too many celiacs continue to flare, or they do better with their celiac, but they go on and they develop multiple forms of other kinds of autoimmune disease, like Sjogren's and Hashimoto's. And when we get all that grain out, those other conditions start to go into remission as well. That's been my experience. So this goes back to, I would strongly encourage anyone with celiac who's following kind of the traditional guidance to read No Grain, No Pain. It was written for that. I mean, a lot of my early patients were, what we were finding was, I named it, we have a name for it, it's called gluten-free whiplash. They learned they were celiac or gluten sensitive. They would go gluten-free in the traditional sense. They'd cut out wheat, barley, and rye, but then they would do better for sure. They would feel better and do better. But then, a couple months in, 3 months in, they're back. Like I'm starting to move backward, or either in the same symptoms, or they develop clusters of other symptoms as they eat other types of gluten and rice or corn. They develop new types of autoimmune conditions. And so I kept seeing that trend repetitively, and it's what led me to do a deeper dive, because 20 some odd years ago, I was just as guilty as any GI doctor in saying, yeah, just go wheat, barley, and rye free. And it wasn't until the clinical outcomes weren't great. And one of the first studies I read on this that really led me to want to dig deeper was a study done. It was a 5-year outcome study on celiacs, where they analyzed celiacs who at diagnosis, and then 5 years later, they were being followed. And what they found is that 92% of them still had persistent GI inflammation, despite the fact that they were compliant on their traditional gluten-free diet. And it was when I read that study the very first time, it was like a light bulb in my brain. Like, why is this happening? If the diet is accurate, if gluten is the primary culprit, and wheat, barley, and rye deficient or absent diets are not leading to resolution, why? What else? What are these people eating? And so when you start tracking what celiacs typically eat, they're trying to replace their bread and their pasta and their cereal with things that are made from corn and rice and sorghum and millet and oats. And so what we did is we backtracked, and I found the original research on the definition of gluten, because I just felt like I needed to dive deeper. But TJ Osborne, no relation, spelled the same, but no relation. He's known as the father of plant biochemistry, of plant protein biochemistry. He's the doctor that originally defined what gluten was. And gluten is defined, according to TJ Osborne, gluten is defined as the family of proteins found within the seeds of grass that are soluble in alcohol. And so now you say, okay, seeds of grass, what are seeds of grass? And you go back and you look at all the different varieties of grass. Well, corn is a grass, rice is a grass, oats are a grass. But why are we saying these things are okay if actually they do contain forms of gluten? And so we started doing more research clinically and found that these people with celiac disease did better. They did well with the traditional gluten-free diet, but then they would hit a plateau and go backwards. And then, when we figured out these other grains and we started taking them out, they did tremendously better and were able to get in remission. And a lot of these people had what we call refractory celiac disease, which is, in mainstream medicine, if you've got refractory celiac disease, the primary treatment is steroids. And you can't take steroids forever because they cause hypertension and diabetes. They destroy your muscle, they destroy your bone, and they cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies that make you sick slowly over time and just erode your health. So we had to have a better solution, and that's why I wrote No Grain, No Pain. So that's the short of it. Who designed lymphocyte proliferation? That was designed by William Shively at University of Texas. It was several decades of research. They created it out of a need for understanding better the nutritional status of humans, because the fundamental flaw historically in measuring nutrition was the compartments. You could measure serum, but serum was largely inaccurate. You could take somebody that had major deficiency of a nutrient and their serums would test out normal. And so that was one of the conundrums. And so this research, the reason why they settled out on the lymphocyte, because this research is, like I said, this is 20 years in the making. The lymphocyte was the ultimate choice for several reasons. Number one, it's a white blood cell. And when you're talking about autoimmune disease specifically, this is the cell of autoimmune disease. Number two, the lymphocyte metabolically represents every other tissue in the body better than any other tissue we could sample. And it's easy to access. We can access it through the blood. We don't have to take biopsies of all your tissues to measure nutritional status. The other reason is that lymphocytes have a 6-month lifespan. So when we look at INA testing, we're looking at a 6-month average, and the outcomes are functional. That's the other benefit to what's called proliferation testing, because what we're not measuring a level in your body, we're measuring an outcome of function in your cell. So when I take your cells from your blood and I put them in a what's called a 99 well plate where we're measuring, we initially get a growth rate of your cells, and that initial growth rate is just your baseline, and it's your baseline, no one else's. Then we go back and repeat the test in triplicate, but when we repeat it, we're giving your cells nutrients one at a time. So for example, we'll baseline you, then we'll repeat the test giving your cells vitamin B1. And then when we see the growth rate after adding B1, did it improve? Did it change, right? Because that's what we're measuring. We're measuring improvement. So if you've ever done an INA test, you'll notice that it's not given, there's not a reference range on the test. A lot of people get confused when they get the result because they don't understand this part, but it's not a reference range. It's a growth percentage improvement. So, the worst you can be is greater than 140%. What that means is when we tested your cells and gave them extra, in this case, B1, their growth improvement enhanced more than 140%, meaning if we give you more B1, your cellular outcomes are going to be enhanced. So it's an outcomes-based test. It's not a standard deviation bell curve test based on a range from X to Y from 10,000 other people who we've sampled and then drew a bell curve around it and averaged it out. So it's an outcomes test from your own cells. You are your own control. And that's why it's so damn accurate. It's because we use you as your own control, and the outcomes are proliferative in nature, meaning they show us that your cells improve when we give them certain things. And they'll show us if your cells won't improve by giving them things too. And that's a good thing. So like if I give your cell B1 and it doesn't improve from its baseline, then giving you more B1 is not necessarily going to be all that beneficial in a clinical setting. So hopefully that helps you understand kind of the history of that test with decades of research. And it's been refined over the decades too. It was originally 20 years of research, but then beyond that, there's been other doctors working on the technology to enhance it and make it better. Any success or any suggestions regarding Parkinson's doing something natural in the success rate? Parkinson's is, the earlier you catch it, the better. Don't wait. If you've been on the L-Dopa, dopamine drugs for a long period of time, in my experience, success rate is less. So the earlier you catch it, the better. Gluten-free, grain-free. You've got to rule out heavy metal. Very, very common heavy metals with Parkinson's disease. Mold is another major trigger. A lot of people change their diet and don't find improvement. But I've had, over the years, I'd say at least 100 cases of Parkinsonian mold poisoning. And when they get out of mold, they do really, really well. So yes, there can be success, but you've got to find all the right pieces. Parkinson's can be very, very tough. And that's for a lot of reasons. One of the bigger reasons is by the time it's being diagnosed, there's decades of damage behind that diagnosis that have occurred up to that point. And so it's tough sometimes to reverse a prolonged time frame of damage, and you have to be patient with it. But there is hope. I still sometimes have neurological problems despite having stopped eating gluten, brain fog, and loss of balance. Are you grain-free or gluten-free? This goes back to what I said a moment ago, Casey. And if you're kind of in that traditional gluten-free diet, you need to go get a copy of No Grain, No Pain and go to town. Stopped eating dairy 10 days ago. Yeah, I can tell you're not doing No Grain, No Pain because there's no dairy in it. So yeah, Casey, if you're still having that persistence, go get a copy of No Grain, No Pain. You might also consider watching my class on gluten. It's called Glutenology. We'll put a link up for you, but glutenology.net. You can just go register. and you'll have access to that class for 7 days for free. You can buy it too, but I think people should have the information. So if you want it for free, you just go register, and we'll put a link. It's glutenology.net/registration is the link, but we'll put that up for you. Get educated, because if you get that class under your belt, you read No Grain, No Pain, apply those strategies, you're going to cruise. Which kind of bread do you recommend that not increase too much glucose levels? Yeah, Warrior Bread, Christina. We made it low glycemic on purpose. So if you haven't tried our Warrior Bread, it's a blend of different flours and fibers, cooks extremely well. It's a little denser than the classic regular family bread, but it's a softer bread. So a lot of the gluten-free breads are really crunchy and tear your roof of your mouth up. But if you haven't tried Warrior Bread, strongly encourage you to do it. It's very low glycemic. Is potassium deficiency a common cause of muscle cramps? It can be. I would say calcium deficiency is much more common in my experience, especially if those cramps are occurring at night. So if you're having the nighttime, my feet cramp, my calves cramp, consider calcium first. If your cramps are more generally throughout the morning and day, consider potassium. That's kind of just it's not a perfect rule, but it's in my experience, it's pretty close, the timing of those cramps. Low magnesium. Okay, so somebody just chiming in there. What do you recommend for plantar fasciitis? Lots of things. I think one of the things, if it's acute, just stay off of it. Stay off of it for a little while and let your body heal. But if it's an ongoing kind of a chronic thing, one of the simple kind of reducing inflammation naturally tools that you can do is take a little Dixie cup, one of those little 4-ounce cups, fill it with water, put it in the freezer, and then once it's frozen, you have like a little cylinder of ice, and then you roll the foot back and forth over that cylinder, and do it pretty aggressively, because part of it is a massage. It's an ice massage where you're reducing the inflammation of the fasciitis, but you're also using that ice cylinder as a device to break up adhesions in the fascia itself, because sometimes fasciitis is caused as a result of adhesions in that tissue. Now, one of the other common drivers of plantar fasciitis, obesity certainly, hands down, puts way too much pressure on the Achilles tendon, which is going to put pressure on the fascia. But the other thing is that people's calves are too tight. And so if you don't, if you can palm the floor with your hands, your calves are probably not too tight. But if you can't, your calves most likely are part of what's holding you back. So working on the mobility of the calf, the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles, can become very, very important for the lifetime strategy of one, getting plantar fasciitis to go away, but two, keeping it at bay. Because when the calf is tight, remember the calf is a very rich blood supply, but the tendon that attaches the calf to the heel, called the Achilles tendon, doesn't have a super rich blood supply. And it's when that pressure on that Achilles tendon, when that calf is so tight, that pressure on the Achilles is what draws up the plantar fascia, and it really starts to create trauma in that area, even with just regular walking. So you really have to make an effort to keep the calves nice and loose and mobile. And sometimes a foam roller on the calves is a very painful thing to do if you've never done it before, and you're tight, because there's a lot of adhesions and knots in the calf. But a good foam roll of your calves, both with the flow of the muscle meat, but also laterally to it, can be very beneficial long term. And then there's other passive treatments too, like laser therapy can be very effective. Ultrasound can be very helpful. And then using natural anti-inflammatories like a combo of vitamin C and quercetin. These are all stopgaps to help with the pain while you're trying to, take care of the cause. But ultimately, you want to know why the plantar fasciitis exists. So number one reason we see it is the calf muscles are way too tight, and they're creating too much pressure on the Achilles. If an older relative has had 3 falls, what's the likely in the last week? What's the likely cause? There's a million things it could be, but I mean, it could be a vascular issue, it could be a dizziness and neurological issue, or it could be a muscular strength issue. I mean, it could just be clumsiness too. It could be one was just an accident. I mean, it's just hard to know without greater degrees of context. Why is my fasting blood sugar higher when taking creatine? I use 2.5 grams a day because creatine provides an energy substrate for your muscles beyond glucose. And so you may have some glucose preservation while on creatine, and that's driving up, to that extent, it's driving up your blood sugar. That's a potential possibility. I would look, Kim, at more, instead of looking at that fasting on those days of creatine, I would track it more either over time with like a hemoglobin A1C testing, or even with a monitor that you wear, and see what it does as an average out over time. Is this just an acute fasting elevation, or is this, impacting you in a more meaningful way long term in the negative? See, Dr. O, your sensitivity test shows that I'm moderately reacting to ashwagandha. What calming support supplement from Gluten-Free Society do you recommend for times when I have high stress? Yeah, it's called Ultra Calm, CALM. Works really, really well. I'd start with that as a tool to help when you're really stressed out. Can we scroll down on that side? Okay. What is your opinion on diseases? Are they caused by nutritional deficiencies or toxicity? There's 4 triggers of inflammatory chronic disease. 4. And I'd spent 2.5 hours on Tuesday going through these in detail. So if you missed that, go back and watch. But what are they? Food, chemical toxins, nutritional deficiencies, and microbial imbalances. Those 4 categories, hands down, if you've got chronic disease, you have to look at those 4 categories if you want resolution. If you don't look at those 4 categories, the likelihood of recovery is almost 0%, minus some type of spontaneous miracle. If you're taking medication, you'll never recover. Medicine doesn't heal disease. Let's just say that. Medicine doesn't heal chronic disease. Because if you got an acute infection, an antibiotic can cure it, no doubt. But chronic autoimmune disease, medicine doesn't heal. It suppresses. It suppresses your alarm systems. Your body is trying to alert you or warn you of the danger that you're in with the behaviors that you have. And medicine suppresses that so that you can go on with your life, ignoring your body's warning systems, and you will never get better. You might feel better in the short, but you will never get better. And the long-term consequence of immunosuppression is cancer. So I mean, to me, that's like playing, that's like gambling with your life. So you got to measure those 4 triggers. I've been drinking distilled water. What can I add to the water to replace the minerals? Salt. You can add an electrolyte product. You can add regular sea salt or Himalayan salt. Have had one UTI after the other all year, even with antibiotics. 10 days ago, I left kidney pain. I got an ultrasound, no results yet. UTI test shows negative, but it is, could it be fungal? Yeah, it could be. You can have a UTI from a fungal infection. Did your doctor test your, so when you do a urinalysis, you can actually request fungal testing on that as well. And if they didn't do that, you might request it. But yeah, it certainly can be. You might try. We have a protocol. We have a couple of different products that we use to support people through that. One is called UTI Relief. The other one is UT Shield. And those are both available at Gluten-Free Society. You can go read more about those and see if they're the right move for you to support you. Let's scroll down on the right. Is the main purpose for eating protein to get the amino acids that protein provides? It's one of the purposes, but not the only. I mean, you need protein as a structure. Typically, we break down protein into its constituent amino acids, but we also break down proteins into smaller peptide chains, and some of those have functions as well. So it's not just amino acids that we're after. Can drinking an amino acids powder mixed with water accomplish the same thing? Look, it can accomplish great things, but what's better than food? Real whole food from real whole animals in terms of the protein? Nothing. I mean, you're not going to beat food for its nutrition prowess and quality. Now, can you supplement? Yeah, you can. And do we supplement people? All the time. Part of it depends on how well you digest, whether you have issues, in your stomach that's reducing your ability to absorb protein from the food that you're eating. So there's a lot of nuance to that, but certainly you can take an amino acid mix. We have something called ultra aminos that we commonly put people on who have issues. Do high histamine foods affect Crohn's? I eat a lot of ground beef. Not necessarily. I mean, you can be Crohn's and have a histamine problem, but not all people with Crohn's have a histamine problem. It's a unique scenario, Terry. I take a brand name. All right, no question there. Maybe, I don't know. So I'm Italian, and I have always had freckles. My freckles went away and got blotchy, kind of light marks. Then lots of freckles on my leg. You think that's vitiligo? Without seeing an actual picture, it's really hard for me to give you a definitive there, Tanya, but probably not. I mean, it's not the absence of freckles that is vitiligo so much as it's the complete absence of skin pigmentation. Which conditions would you associate with lymphocytic hypophysis or hypophysis? I have already celiac, Hashimoto, and GAD65. I mean, autoimmunity as a primary, Olive. I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Oliveri. Autoimmunity. So it goes back to what should you be measuring? This is true of any of you, no matter what your autoimmune situation is. Food, chemicals, microbes, nutritional deficiencies is where you start 100% of the time so that you can understand what your triggers are. Autoimmune disease is not, it's multifactorial. It's never like one smoking gun. And most people have upwards of at least 10 triggers, and usually it's closer to 20 to 30. And you need to test to get to that if you've already done your best with diet and lifestyle change. If you're already doing the right things, just kind of historically accurate, like getting good sunshine, good sleep, exercise, clean food, and you're doing those things already, it's time to test. Quit guessing. It's time to start measuring. What's the best thing for yeast overgrowth? Depends. One very effective thing, Donna, is caprylic acid. I will use 3 major tools if I'm speculating about yeast overgrowth for somebody. It's something called caprylic acid, something called yeast shield, which is a blend of different herbs, and then another one called biotic defense with Asperlardi. Those 3 would be kind of like my go-to 3 if we were just speculating that somebody had a yeast overgrowth issue. We did a whole class on what causes yeast overgrowth that might also be helpful, and maybe we can throw that up for you as well. But if you want to go look for those different supplementals at Gluten-Free Society, you can. It's yeast shield, ultra caprylic acid, and biotic defense with Asperlardi. I tested low for manganese in whole blood and intracellular through your testing. Should I be taking 10 milligrams of manganese? You can. 10's not a toxic dose, and it definitely will go a long way to supporting your cells. My stool is usually clay colored, light yellow, and very light brown. I'm on very high enzymes and TUDCA, no gallbladder. You need to be on bile salts. TUDCA works okay for that, but in my opinion, bile is a better solution there. Always end up living in mold. I mean, so you're fat malabsorbing basically. If you're on a strong dose of pancreatic enzyme that help you digest fat and you're on TUDCA, you might consider adding bile salts to your regimen, see if that gives you any improvement. But if you're in mold, mold's going to damage your GI tract and it's going to reduce your capacity to digest and absorb, and that may be part of your problem. So you've got to, if that's the case, you definitely have to figure that out. I'm trying to remove unconjugated bilirubin and would like to know how best to support glucuronidation. I'm taking glucarate and uridine. So you're trying to remove indirect bilirubin. I would argue that one of the best things you can do, even non-supplemental in that regard, would be to go outside and get sunshine. UV light breaks bilirubin down. But is your bilirubin elevated as a total? Is it just your unconjugated, or is it also conjugated? So because that context matters. Because if you have, for example, a hemolytic anemia, where your red blood cells are breaking down too quickly and too prematurely, then I would look toward like vitamin E to stabilize cell membranes. I'd look at phosphatidylserine and choline to help stabilize the cell membrane and support its structure. But if you're looking for other things just to support the liver, in that regard, I would be definitely lipoic acid. Look to cysteine or N-acetylcysteine. And even herbally look to milk thistle that's standardized to contain silymarin. Thoughts about TTFD to correct low B1? I'm hands down, I like benfotiamine. If you're trying to correct B1, benfotiamine, one of the most effective, not one of the most, the most effective in my experience. Antibiotics undermine, not a question. Okay, there it is. Back it up just a little bit. Killing off those bacteria. Okay, so I took Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Gigi, to restore my glucuronidation. Would you please speak to other restorative strains? It's not that there's any particular strain that's going to restore your glucuronidation in your liver. Where most people have problems with liver issues and glucuronidation is from the endotoxins produced by gram-negative bacteria colonizing the GI tract. So by default, the helpful bacteria like Lactobacillus, and there are a number of different types, Bifidobacter, number of different types, all very helpful to control the growth or the overpopulation of gram-negative bacteria that are driving the production of toxins that damage the liver. So it's these what are called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. They basically permeate across into the portal circulation and go to the liver, and they're notorious for causing liver damage. So it's not that those strains directly help the liver, it's that those strains suppress gram-negatives that cause toxin production that damage the liver. So if you control the gram-negatives, you're going to control, and you don't need necessarily a probiotic to control the gram-negatives. Sometimes you need to get the right testing done, a culture sensitivity to identify that, so that you understand how, if you have gram-negative strains growing out of control, like Enterobacter or Citrobacter, how do you neutralize those? And if you do a sensitivity test, a lot of times you can find out which thing will neutralize them. In some cases, it's plant botanicals like garlic extract or oregano. Sometimes it's things like uva ursi or berberine. So I would look at it more from that perspective than just from taking probiotics. What are your thoughts on patients with Hashimoto's taking iodine? I'm okay with it. I think one first test, but don't, if you've got Hashimoto's, don't just go high dose shotgun a ton of iodine without understanding whether or not you need iodine, because there are some cases of Hashimoto's that iodine deficiency is part of their problem. So this goes back to testing. If a person, and the best way to test for iodine is INA combined with something called an iodine loading test. And when you do an iodine loading test, you also want to do what's called a halide analysis. The halides are things like fluoride and bromine. These are competitors to iodine. So what happens is many people with Hashimoto's have an overabundance of fluoride or bromine inhibiting iodine uptake into their thyroid. And so sometimes when you give those people higher doses of iodine, you can anticipate the potential for a side effect, right? So if somebody's got really high fluoride and I give them high dose iodine because they're iodine deficient, I'm going to start letting that fluoride go from their thyroid, and that can cause what feels like a bad reaction to iodine, but it's just a temporary detoxification of fluoride. So it depends on the person. It depends on whether they're low or whether they're not, but there's not a rule that says that everyone with Hashimoto should not take iodine. And people that are out there saying that, in my opinion, aren't accurate. You have to test. Let's see. Yeah, just somebody's comment. So I like this. So she says, I had normal MMA and homocysteine, both tests that are surrogate markers for B12. So her levels were normal, but only her INA showed that she was low in B12. Again, it goes back to accuracy with the testing. You can have normal MMA and still need more B12. Same thing with homocysteine. Why is the no-grain diet so effective for autoimmune symptoms? Have you read my book? Have you watched any of my shows, Paula, on no grain and why? I talked extremely in depth about the no grain diet and why it works. And so in a nutshell, it's gluten-free. It reduces mold and mycotoxin exposure. It reduces glyphosate exposure. It reduces heavy metal toxin exposures. It lowers your carbohydrate value of your diet when your carb levels are too high. And it leads to increased omega-3 fatty acids. Those are some of the core concepts as to the why. But if you want to do a deeper dive, I'd strongly encourage you to read the book to have that knowledge. And you can check out some of my other YouTube videos on grain-free and the concept of the diet. What can my mother eat other than that cruciferous vegetables? She has RA, and her blood pressure drops after eating cold vegetables like beetroot. I mean, that's just too... what else can she eat? She can eat anything else that she tolerates. I mean, at the end of the day, there's 3 rules around food. Number 1, you can't get healthy eating food that's not. So processed, ultra-processed food, that kind of stuff I try to keep away. Number 2, don't eat what you're allergic or sensitive to. So has your mother been tested for sensitivities and allergic response to food? If she hasn't, that would help you answer that question. And then number 3, it's listening to the feedback from your own body. If you eat a food and your body rejects it for whatever reason, gives you a symptom for whatever reason, then you want to honor your body's messaging and keep that food out. So, when you ask what can she eat, that's really the answer, because there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to complicated autoimmune disease that has food as a backdrop culprit to why it might be even present. Any advice on Hashimoto's nodules? Go follow No Grain, No Pain, and watch my thyroid masterclass. How to maintain hemoglobin levels in spite of eating healthy. What does that mean to eat healthy? Eating healthy is such a relative a relative statement. Are you eating healthy, or are you eating what you perceive to be healthy? Are you eating what society has deemed healthy, or are you eating what is actually healthy for you? And when it comes to hemoglobin, to make hemoglobin, we need enough protein, copper, we need enough iron, we need enough B vitamins. And if you're deficient in any of those nutrients, then you are going to run the risk of low hemoglobin, especially females, because if you're menstruating, every month you lose hemoglobin through blood loss. And so, as a general rule, what I have typically seen in what drives low hemoglobin the most is iron deficiency, and secondarily would be protein deficiency, tertiarily would be copper deficiency. So those three, making sure you're eating foods that are very rich in those, and maybe consider getting testing done. If your white blood cell count's 14,000, how much do you weigh? How tall are you? That's high, but you could be feeling fine, and you could. Sometimes we're sick, but our bodies are fighting, right? Our bodies are really amazing. You could be sick, but not sick, not symptomatically sick. So like you could pick up a virus or a bug, and your immune system ramps up production, increases your white blood cell count. That just happens to be the week you visited your doctor and got your blood work done. And so now you've got this really high white blood cell count, even though you feel okay. Because a lot of times the infections are self-limiting. You give your body the opportunity to win, and it wins. So, but if you have chronic high white blood cell counts every time you go year after year, then I would suspect that you're being exposed to some type of immune trigger, and you want to figure that out. Because if it's chronic, you're gonna burn through your white blood cells. You're gonna burn out your bone marrow, and your ability to keep up with that demand at that level over time is going to deteriorate, and then you're going to be immunocompromised. So depends on the nature of whether it's acute or chronic. How to lower uric acid? One of the best ways is vitamin C and foods rich in antioxidants. If you want to find out what foods I'm sensitive to, which test should I ask my doctor to run? Ideally, so there's IgG, there's IgA, there's IgM, there's IgE, there's immune complex, and there's what's called T cell response. So ideally, you'd want all of those things. I'm a mosquito magnet. How can I change that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you can try some of the herbal oil mosquito repellents on your skin. You can also take high doses of vitamin B1. High doses of vitamin B1 have a mosquito repelling effect. Yeah, I love this comment. So Oliveri says, I personally say that within 5 years, my villus atrophy remained high on the MARS3B despite a total gluten-free diet. So remember, there's more. So beyond the wheat, barley, and rye, oats and corn and rice can all cause villus atrophy, but other things can also cause villus atrophy. And you might also look at some of these. B vitamin deficiency can cause villus atrophy. Certain medicines, especially in the blood pressure category of ARBs, drugs that end in ARTAN, ARTAN, are angiotensin receptor blockers. That class of medication can cause villus atrophy. Steroids can cause villus atrophy. Ibuprofen can cause villus atrophy. When you combine Tylenol and ibuprofen, it can enhance villus atrophy. You can have villus atrophy as a result of a parasite infection. So there's more. I mean, this is one of the fundamental flaws. When I said earlier that how celiac was diagnosed is based on the cornerstone of villus atrophy, but many things can cause villus atrophy. So why are we using that as a gold standard for celiac disease when other things can also cause villus atrophy? And to me, anybody who's got villus atrophy should have those other things ruled out as well, not just put the stamp of celiac on their shoulders, but also have those other things looked at, because this is another reason why refractory celiac disease is diagnosed. Sometimes it's multifactorial. No, not sometimes. It's always multifactorial. Not even 1% of the world know what intracellular analysis is. We're hoping to change that, Javier. That's our mission. How do you lower triglycerides? you back off on carbohydrate. If you have high triglycerides in your blood, you're probably over consuming carbs. A good place to start is what I call the rule of thirds. When you're looking at your total calories, you should never eat more than a third of your total calories in the form of carbohydrates. So a third of carbs, a third of fat, a third of protein is a good place to start. We see it all the time. People 200, 300, 400 triglycerides will come down under 75 when they get their carbohydrate intake under control. Oh, so I'm coming back to the Leslie's comment about her son with type 1 diabetes. If your doctor says that metformin is to protect your son's heart, you need a new doctor. That's my opinion. Now, make your own choices, keep your own medical consult, but metformin is not heart protective. I mean, excuse my language, that's just horseshit. Metformin doesn't protect your heart. It actually causes congestive heart failure long-term because the nutrient that it inhibits, CoQ10, is responsible for maintaining the strength, the muscular strength and tonicity of the heart. And congestive heart failure is a consequence of CoQ10 deficiency. So if your son, who's maybe young, is on this drug for the next 30 or 40 years, what do you think is going to happen to that poor kid's CoQ10 levels and subsequently to his heart? There's no way you can make that statement that metformin is going to protect anyone's heart. Sorry, I get fired up. A friend of mine has ALS and they give her no hope. I want to put her in contact with your office. She's about 9 years in and is now in a wheelchair. Can your protocols help her at this point? I don't know, Diana. I can't predict the future better than anyone else, but I never start from the premise of no hope. I believe that any doctor who's preaching hopelessness is the wrong doctor. It's not the place of the doctor to predict the future for the patient. It's the place of the doctor to have great empathy and bedside manner and communication, to be honest. And you can be honest and not take away somebody's hope. ALS is tough. It's a tough one to treat because it's nerve tissue predominantly, and because it's usually very multifactorial. My experience with ALS, my stepfather died of ALS. This was before I knew what I know today, but he worked in a metal shop where he was breathing in toxic heavy metals on a regular basis without a respirator. So we suspect, after the fact, I can't go back in time, but we suspect that a big part of his ALS development was as a result of heavy metal exposure over decades of work exposure. But ALS has triggers, just like any other autoimmune disease. It's just a tougher one. It's a tougher one, and it can be a very big challenge to treat. But if she wants to reach out to us, I'll stand by her side and I'll help her in every way that I can. But I can't predict the future either. How to lower creatinine levels? I think what are the levels, and are they really low? You have to think about how the reference range, and there's a lot of variable in that, because creatinine can be affected from day to day, just as a result of your protein intake. So I argue in some cases, low levels of creatinine are not necessarily a bad thing. So I need greater context than just that question to really to really be able to comment better. How much B12 is safe to take daily? We regularly, Christina, give people up to 10,000 micrograms a day, but there's no known toxicity level of B12. That doesn't mean you shouldn't proceed with caution. But like I said, we regularly give people up to 10,000 micrograms a day. Best form, methylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. Those two forms. Hydroxy is the form that's naturally in foods, and methylcobalamin is what your body produces from it to basically run or help to run the methylation cycle internally. So we generally will use one of those two forms. I have one called methylcobalamin, which is a 5,000 microgram lozenge. It's also important when you're taking B12. If you have a history of gut damage or malabsorption, you want to take it sublingually. B12 is unique in that it requires a couple of different mechanisms to be properly absorbed. But if you take it sublingually in like a lozenge form, you'll absorb it through your mucosa in your mouth, and it'll go into your bloodstream directly. How do you stretch hip flexors with a hurt knee? You put a really nice thick pad down on the ground when you're on that knee, because one of the best ways is just a classic runner stretch. Man, I should do a whole rehab class on joint aches and pains. Maybe we'll get in the gym this summer and do it. Asthma. Quercetin helps, but what keeps it away? Finding out what your triggers are. A lot of people with asthma, the triggers are in their food, especially wheat. Wheat's a big trigger. As a matter of fact, one of the older known forms of asthma is called baker's asthma, and it was caused as a result of bakers hurling up dough, aerosolizing flour, and breathing it in, and it would irritate the airways, creating asthmatic symptoms. So from a food perspective, going grain-free can be very, very helpful. And for many people, it's the solution to their asthma. But there are other variable environmental factors too that can contribute to it. Mold is a big one. And, ruling out mold, in my opinion, is very important. Air quality is also very important. And so if you don't already have good air quality in your home, that would be something I would strongly encourage you to look into, an ultrafine HEPA filter. What can cause mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration to dip? Copper deficiency, iron deficiency, B6 deficiency, zinc deficiency are all potential reasons why you might have a low MCHC. Is CoQ10 with soybean good? I feel like I get inflammation with it. If you feel like you get inflammation with it, some people are allergic to soy, even if it's organic soy, non-GMO soy. So remember, soy is one of the top 8 allergens in the world. So it's possible that you just have a soy reaction. So find a soy-free CoQ10 if you feel like you're getting inflammation with it. Yeah, our CoQ10 is soy-free, Carolina. It's called CoQ10 Max. I have a white coating on the tongue even after 2 weeks of fluconazole and 18 months grain-free. Any tips? Yeah, check your microbiome. You may not be yeast. And is it a white coating? Is it actually yeast, or is it something else? I mean, white coating on the tongue, sometimes it's not actually yeast. Dehydration can cause your tongue to have a white coating on it, to get as an example, Sue. So do you feel bad? Are you on fluconazole under the suspicion that white coating is yeast, or are you actually symptomatic with oral thrush symptoms? Better context I could give you better tips. So question about autoimmune disease, how to cure it. You obviously didn't watch Tuesday's show. I would just encourage any of you who maybe are new to the show today, or maybe just missed Tuesday's show, but you're struggling with autoimmune disease, please go watch that show. I didn't put 2.5 hours into a show to go and watch. And it's not a simple answer, right? What causes autoimmune disease? I can simplify it probably better than anyone in the world. Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the primary drivers of autoimmune disease. There's other nuance to it, and we go into that nuance in that show. But if you struggle, it's worth 2.5 hours of your time. If you struggle, if you're trying to really find a solution, it's worth your time. Some people, complain about, Dr. Osborne, your show's too long. Just give me the 5-minute skinny. Food, microbes, nutritional deficiencies, and microbial imbalances or chemical toxins are your triggers. That's your 30-second synopsis of the show. But the devil is in the details, and you could understand those 4 things, but not understand how to go about navigating, how to identify them in yourself. That's why I created the show. I talk about tests. I talk about specific labs, what to do, what you can do at home for free, what you should be asking your practitioner. It's a very detailed class. So if you missed it, and you're an autoimmune diagnosis, it's not one you want to miss. You go back and watch it. And that way, when you watch it and take notes, next Thursday, I'll be here again. If there's something that's not clear for you, now you have the context of 2.5 hours of my knowledge in your head, right? I mean, I've been doing this almost 25 years now. I would argue, I don't know that this is a true statement or not, but arguably, I've put more autoimmune disease in remission maybe than anyone. I can't make that statement because I'm not intrinsically in other doctors' practices, but I know most of the really great doctors in the world that are doing functional medicine for autoimmunity. And I have one of the busiest practices and one of the most profound practices and one of the most consistently long run practices today in this arena, in this world. And so I just shared with you 2.5 hours of 25 years worth of experience of navigating autoimmune disease into remission using diet and lifestyle. And so those of you that are watching this show that ignore that and just decide to skip it, there's not much else I can do for you. Okay, let's see here. Enzymes for histamine intolerance, you can do DAO, diamine oxidase. Tanya, we have a product called Ultra DAO that you might find helpful. Let's see, Christina says, I have a 10-year-old son whose speech ability has deteriorated a lot in the last 4 years. We hardly understand anything about him. He has had most of the genetic tests and all the results were negative. The celiac test was also negative. The doctors are surprised. He's currently on a traditional gluten-free diet. How can we help him? I thought of speech apraxia or Friedreich ataxia and these immune diseases. Have you treated patients with similar? Yes. Get him, immediately quit the traditional gluten-free diet and go grain-free. Go get a copy of No Grain, No Pain. Follow the diet. See if he gets any improvement just by making those changes. But I would also immediately consider mold testing. Anytime we see speech impediment or speech delay or brain damage in kids, mold is almost always a trigger. And so I would want to, if he were in my office today, that would be one of the first things I'd try to rule out with you guys. Dealing with hypothyroid and high levels of inflammation and very high platelet counts. Doctors keep blowing me off and don't have anything they can do. It sounds autoimmune, Christina. Again, food, chemicals, microbes, nutritional deficiencies. Watch Tuesday's show. Get a copy of No Grain, No Pain. Apply the 30-day diet and monitor those platelet counts. Actually, do it longer than 30 days. I'd say follow the No Grain, No Pain diet for 90 days and recheck your platelets. What we traditionally see in people with high platelet levels is they will start to normalize within 3 months of diet change. They will start to come down. See it all the time as just a observational side effect of diet change. Is there a correlation between coexisting MCAS, which is mast cell activation, thrombocytosis, unidentified autoimmune disease? Yeah, mold. The correlation underlying those coexisting conditions is almost always mold. And if you add ulcerative colitis to that list, you probably at 99% mold. And remember, part of where mold comes from, a lot of people, you can have environmental mold, but where a lot of people's mold sources come from is grain consumption. A tremendous portion of the grain supply is mold contaminated and mycotoxin contaminated. So those are also sources of mold. This is why some people say, well, I eat grain in Italy and I feel better versus here. And maybe that person is feeling better because they're not getting the glyphosate exposure, but grain is dangerous for more than one reason than glyphosate for many people. What do you recommend for brain fog? You got to find out what's triggering it. The brain fog is inflammation of the brain. So what are the triggers that are producing that brain fog as a consequence for you. Certainly food can play a role. Chemical exposures can play a role. Nutritional deficit, B vitamin deficiencies can play a role case. So I'd be looking at all of those things. Besides my gluten intolerance, I was diagnosed with vitiligo 4 years ago, and 2 years ago from a blood test, I was asked to do a scan, which shows nodules on both sides, non-cancerous. Lately, I seem to have a lot of hyperthyroid symptoms. Should I have another scan? What's the scan going to tell you? A scan's going to tell you about the form and the shape of your thyroid, or maybe the fact that it's inflamed or not, but it's not going to tell you why it's malformed or why it's misshaped or why you have nodes or why you might have inflammation. You have to find out the triggers. The whole premise of a lab test or of a diagnostic test is not to create a physical characteristic definition of what's going on. It's to understand why, right? Because the premise of a test really should be, we want to understand why your disease exists. Unfortunately, in today's mainstream world, doctors run tests all the time that don't tell you why about anything. They just tell you what. The tests are designed to be diagnostic centric, meaning the test will help the doctor give you a name to call your illness. And by stamping that name on you, they're now giving you victim status and telling you, look, here's your disease. If it's autoimmune, here's your autoimmune disease. We don't know what causes it, is the next thing they're going to tell you. And then the next thing they're going to tell you is, but we know how to treat it. Take this drug for the rest of your life. Does that make sense? Here's your disease. We don't know what causes it, but we're certain that you should take this for the rest of your life. No, it doesn't make any sense. Anybody with any lick of sense can understand that. So when you're thinking about which tests to do, the question mark is, does this test help me get closer to understanding why I have this problem? Or does this test help me get closer to diagnosing me with a name that's going to lead to treating me with a drug that doesn't actually resolve my health issue? And if you start thinking in that line, now you're thinking first principles thinking. We should all have this in our lives. The first principle thinking is root cause. What is the root cause? How can I empower myself, not empower other companies to become enriched as a result of keeping me chronically sick, but medicating my symptoms away? Can ozone therapy help with mold detox? It can. I'm borderline low in about 6 different amino acids. Should I take an amino acid supplement? My diet is very clean. Yeah, that would be a good place to start. If you have a lot of deficits in those, you can either take a supplement or you can consider eating more protein in your diet. As a general rule of thumb, if you're really deficient in a lot of amino acids, consider about 1 gram of protein per kilogram, or not per kilogram, sorry, 1 gram protein per pound of body weight if you're not overweight, like if you're at a healthy weight. Are afternoon naps okay to take when you're not getting good sleep? Yes. Afternoon naps are fine. Do you ever have sales on your lab tests or supplements? Yes, we do. We have a we have a sale today?
Yes, it is.
I'm a terrible promoter.
Ultra nutrients, and the code is core 15.
Okay, so yeah, Ultra Nutrients is our one of our core products that we recommend everybody use. It's a multivitamin, multi-mineral. Core 15, C-O-R-E 15, and right now, if you use that promo code, you'll save 15%. We'll put a link up for that product for you. But yeah, we do site-wide sales and around in September too. That's my birthday sale, and then we do sales throughout the year. So if you're on our email list, Tanya, get on our email list if you're not. And the way to do that is just go to glutenfreesociety.org and sign up there for our newsletter. The other thing, don't we have a text? Do you have something you can put up? So just text us. And this is true for any of you. If you guys want to be on we call it our VIP list, because we sometimes send out bigger discounts and more frequent discounts through text messaging. So if you want to be on our text messaging program, we're going to put that across the screen for you right now. And all you have to do is text. I don't even know what it is. But Mel's going to throw that up for you guys. So if you want to get discounts, sign up for a texting. And as far as lab tests, yes, we also discount our lab tests periodically. My 41-year-old niece, let's see where'd it go? Oh, here it is. My 41-year-old niece has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. I totally agree with you. This is your disease. This is your pill. That's exactly what he told her. How and what can she do We're starting with the diet. I mean, you're starting in the right place, Desiree. Starting with the diet. You can do that now, today. No grain, no pain is the culmination of decades of my personal clinical experience working with autoimmune cases and helping people get better. So that's always the best place to start, in my opinion. Now, maybe I'm biased, but this is what I do and this is what I've seen. So start there first. Now, there's a last chapter in the book on functional medicine. Read that chapter too, because I'm of the firm belief that if you have an autoimmune disease and you've changed your diet and you're still struggling and you're looking for a way to truly overcome, then you need data. And this is where testing can become very, very valuable to anyone trying to navigate this successfully. And I have a credo, and my credo is test, don't guess. Because guesswork is fine at first. Like, you can guess, maybe you can guess intelligently. There's such a thing as an intelligent guess, and doctors make intelligent guesses quite a bit, including myself. But I only make intelligent guesses when patients put me in the corner or the position where they don't test. I don't like to guess. I like to have knowledge, objective knowledge, because for me, the objectivity of testing allows for a greater degree of confidence on what guidance to give that individual in order to get the best possible outcome as quickly as we can. And testing allows us to do that. Guessing, you can guess wrong. I could tell a person, your symptoms sound exactly like a B12 deficiency, and I could be wrong, and it may not be. And then we lose 3 months of supplementation time and cost on that guess. So again, going back to test, don't guess. But a good place to always start is No Grain, No Pain. Just use that as your autoimmune book to start as a starting place beforehand. I like this commentary. Guessing costs too much money and time. It does. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes, I mean, testing can be expensive, but guessing is way more expensive. Most of the people that come to me, I mean, they've been to 7 or 8 doctors. They're on, a litany of medicines, 5 or more. They've even been to functional doctors who didn't test them. And so they've been medicated, they've been guessed at, they've been labeled, but they're not better. They're still frustrated. And then they've gone to the internet, and then they've done their own homework trying to guess for themselves. And they've spent, thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe multiple years of their life on a mission to try to just be healthy again. And you can skip that part and go straight to data, and then, bypass a lot of years of pain and cost, and get a blueprint, because there's no one cause of autoimmune disease. I've said this a number of times, but it's multifactorial. You can take 1,000 people with rheumatoid arthritis, and they will not have rheumatoid arthritis for the same reason. There may be similarities between the cases. There may be dramatic differences between the cases. I mean, I've had cases of rheumatoid where Lyme was the primary factor, or where gluten was the primary factor, or where mold was the primary factor. I once had a case. She was a woman with RA, and she was a baker. She owned a bakery, and every day she's breathing in wheat flour, right? And her RA was flaring and out of control, and we had to get her out of the bakery. That was part of the solution for her. But we got her out of the bakery. She felt better, but then she had a mold problem. And so then, so in her case, it was gluten from the wheat flour that she was baking every day, but then it was also mold in her home. And so we had 2 kind of problems there. But the only way we were able to discern that was through testing. There's no way we would have known those things accurately by just speculating. So point being, save yourself years of quality of life, years of grief, and work with somebody, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else that's knowledgeable like me. It does, again, this isn't the show where I just try to force my services down your throat. This is a show where I just try to give you information that you can take action on and really help recover your health. But the worst thing in the world is for you to struggle and suffer indefinitely because you're just throwing guesswork at it, or letting other doctors throw guesswork at it. And those of you that do want to work with me, call my office. I mean, I've trained I've been doing this 24 years. I've trained another doctor. I've been training him for the last year and a half, and he's on our team now, Dr. Driscoll. And then my son's in training right now. So those of you who really want help, feel free to call you can all feel free to call my office and talk to my team and see if it's a good fit. And if it is, welcome aboard. Okay. How do you get insurance to cover lymphocyte proliferation? You don't. You're not going to get insurance to cover it. They've all written the same. One white paper was written about 15 years ago against lymphocyte proliferation. And I think I caused it. We had interesting story. I'll wrap up today with this story just for you, Melinda. I had a woman that I was treating. She had migraine headaches, and every year she'd visit the ER room anywhere from like 3 to 6 times to the tune of like 20 grand a visit. Talk about expensive. That's expensive. So she had an ER bill anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year for like the last 10 years of her life. And she came to see me. We did the right testing. We determined that she had several B vitamin deficiencies that are known migraine triggers, B12 and B6 and folate. She also had magnesium deficiency, which is a known migraine trigger, but she was gluten sensitive, and that was part of her trigger as well. And once we figured all this out, within about 6 months, she hadn't had a migraine and didn't have another migraine. And she actually still comes and sees me preventatively. This was over 20 years ago, this particular case. And anyway, Blue Cross Blue Shield was the insurer. They called my office about a year after 6 months after we'd gotten rid of all of her migraines. They called my office and they want to do a case review. So this was back when I used to take insurance. So we said, okay, we'll do a case review. We sent them the files. They reviewed the case, and then they demanded a refund on the case. And I said, no, I'm not giving you a refund. This woman, I just saved you $100,000 in emergency room visits for the rest of this woman, and not just $100,000 a year for the rest of this woman's life. I saved you. I'm not about to give you a refund on services I rendered that helped this woman. I said, you can set me up with an oral review, because they just did a review without me. And so that's what they wanted to do. They wanted me to meet with a nurse. So then I got on the phone with a nurse, and I ate her lunch. She didn't know what the hell she was talking about. And I said, why don't you run away and run along and you get a doctor on the phone? This is not an insult to any nurse, by the way. This is just, I was so pissed at the time that I treated her maybe a little more harshly than I should. I'm more calm today than I was when I was a younger man. But anyway, so I got a doctor on the phone, and so then we had our conversation about the case, and basically their finality on it was that I was doing things outside of the scope of the standard of care of my colleagues. What does that mean in layman's terms? It means that I didn't just recommend the MRI and recommend a bunch of treatment for the rest of this person's life that would have kept her in the emergency room like the other doctors had been doing. I actually cared enough to dive in deeper and analyze it. And because most of my peers don't do that kind of work, they said insurance shouldn't cover it. And anyway, I declined to give them their money back. They couldn't get it back from me, and I wasn't going to give it back to them. But anyway, we agreed to disagree, and that was when I dropped insurance. But it was shortly after that, because the ultimate question was, how do you get INA covered by insurance? We used to run a lot of INAs through insurance because of doctors like myself. I have done probably more INAs than anyone alive. I could probably say that and be accurate. I've done a lot of them. The insurance companies got together, Blue Cross and Cigna, because Cigna also did a review shortly after Blue Cross. They were coming after me. They were reviewing me like crazy. And then ultimately they gave me a scarlet letter. If you know the meaning, they put a stamp on my profile on insurance coverage websites, basically calling me a bad doctor, tarnishing my reputation because I got their patients better and saved them money. Go figure. We're not incentivized to find cures. We're incentivized to work on cures. But anyway, they wrote a white paper against INA and they had some quack write up this paper talking about how it wasn't standard of care and trying to debunk the science of INA. And they didn't really do a good job. The white paper has so many flaws and holes in it, but That paper is used at this point today. It's used by every insurance company. It's used by United Healthcare, Cigna, Blue Cross, Aetna, as a shield to not cover INA. So when I say you're not going to get your INA covered, I know very, very intrinsically that that isn't going to happen. Now, you can argue with your insurance company all you want and advocate for yourself. Some of the Christian-based insurance companies I have seen come back and cover it. There's one called Samaritan's Purse that we've seen cover it, but it's rare. And the amount of work you have to do to get them to cover it, you could have paid yourself probably 10x over what the test cost you to get that refund. Anyway, it's not to deter any of you from trying to demand that your insurance companies come on board, but I'm just telling you the reality. These people don't care about your health. They care about taking your money, and when you get unhealthy, they care about denying you your coverage. I mean, isn't this why the United Healthcare CEO was murdered in the streets of New York not very long ago? Because these companies, in my opinion, are evil. They're out to make a buck, and when it comes to your health, they could give a shit less about any of you. They are in bed with doctors and hospital networks that are all owned by corporate interests, and their whole priority, again, these are my opinions, isn't to help you get better. That's what the commercial says. But the reality is they want to victimize you with a name. They want to only cover covered care that they have contractual interest with. And anything outside of the box, they're going to dismiss, call quackery, even though that's what works. If every doctor was doing what I was doing, we would spend anywhere near $4 trillion a year in the United States. It'd probably be in the millions because people would be so damn healthy. And we'd have a society that recognizes how to be healthy and why it's important to have certain behaviors to maintain good health, that we wouldn't be treating everybody. We wouldn't be crying about how many people are so sick. It's like, how many people are sick because of their own behaviors and they don't know it because their doctors suck? I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it is doctors don't understand health. They understand how to treat disease and understand how to label people and treat disease with drugs and chemicals. They don't understand anything about actual health. And insurance companies don't care about your health. And the government sure as hell doesn't care about your health. We learned that over these last 6 years. So really, what are you left with? Yourself. You should be your best advocate. And if you're not advocating for yourself, no one else is going to advocate for you. And your doctor, as much as they may care, and I know there's a lot of really well-intentioned doctors out there, medical doctors included. So this isn't me damning the entire profession of medicine, not by any stretch. I think there's some really wonderful people out there. But I will also say this, the road to hell is paved with good intent. And you can have the best, nicest doctor that has an intention that is phenomenally good. But if their intent is to medicate you for the rest of your life and call that a solution, that's the road to hell. That's the road to not getting a solution. That's the road to bankruptcy and loss of quality of life, and not just bankruptcy of your bank account when the medicines become too expensive and too overwhelming, and then you end up on Medicare that doesn't cover things, and then you have to start coming out of pocket. But it also bankrupts the social system that we've created around healthcare. Your tax dollars are paying for that healthcare for other people who abuse the system and abuse their bodies. And to me, anyway, I should probably be quiet. To me, you've got to advocate for yourself. And if you're an autoimmune patient and you're sick as hell and you don't know what to do, start with one fundamental thing. Read No Grain, No Pain. The book costs you $9 on Amazon, or you can check it out for free at your library if that's what it takes. But read it. Empower yourself with the knowledge in it. Follow the diet. If you don't feel tremendously better after reading it and following it, then consider looking for a good functional practitioner who can test you to get you definitive information. But please don't waste 5 or 10 or 15 years running through a circuitous system that doesn't really have the aim to get you better and only really has the aim to label you and medicate you. So, rant over. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. And if I stepped on anybody's toes, that wasn't my intent. But at any rate, I'll be back here on Tuesday for another Dr. Osborne Zone show. And again, next Thursday at 12:30 Central Standard Time to answer your questions. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next week.